Hi, everybody, and welcome to the second episode of the Matrix podcast. This one is called Deep Dive, and we are going to talk about the technical reference architectures over the C4 model. But before that, let me introduce myself if you're watching the podcast for the first time. My name is Martin Ivanov, and I've been in the ServiceNow space for around 7 years now. For the last 2 years, I've been named double MVP because of my passion to explore different things and share them with the wider audience. Today with me is my co-host Trifon. Trifon, over to you.
Hello guys, my name is Trifon Getsov. I'm leading the architectural department at Do ITWise, and as Marty mentioned, today actually we'll deep dive into one of our documentation domains that we use. But before we jump to the details, let me give you some quick details what actually we talked previous time as a quick recap, and then we'll focus on the specifics for today. So previous time, we actually introduced you to our way how we document a solution end to end. As we mentioned, we use the Archimate notation to capture a business requirements, the motivation of that corresponding enterprise, their strategy, the business processes that they want to transform on top of what type of application services they want to run those business processes and the technology that actually makes everything work. We discussed how we actually draw business process. We mentioned that we use BPMN notation for this. We also discussed that we are using a custom proprietary made CSDM template in order for the data modeling portion. And the focus of today's meeting is how actually we craft technical architectures. And today actually we'll see a couple of our technical reference architectures. We use the C4 model notation for this part, but the details are coming shortly. Marty, back to you.
Yes, thanks for the intro, Trifon, and for the recap of the previous episode. Now, before we go deeper into the way that we document our solution architectures, let me say a few words about the C4 model itself. It has been created, as you can imagine, by a software developer and architects around 10, 12 years ago, and it's an abstraction first approach to document technical solutions with the analogy of the maps and zooming in into the maps, showing a little bit more details. It's called C4 model because we have four different things in it, starting with C first, which is the system context. Then we have container, component, and of course, talking about software solutions, we have to have code. The system context, as I mentioned, is a diagram that provides a starting point or showing the system in scope and the world around it. Analogy with the maps, it could be the United Kingdom. Here you see just the big picture. Going a little bit deeper, we have the container diagram, which shows the software systems in scope, show the high level technical building blocks. So now with the United Kingdom and the islands, we see that we have Guernsey and Jersey. The same with the software, we have, for example, the single page application, the mobile app, the API application, and so on. And the next step, the component diagram, is a zoom in of the previous level. So here we see a zoom in the Jersey island, and the analogy is now a breakdown of the single page application into sign-in controller, security component, database, and so on. And of course, the fourth part is the code. It is not mandatory, but yeah, it can be a UML diagram, or we can directly paste the code if it's not a big portion of it onto that diagram. And the idea is to have the full picture of everything that is readable on four different levels for the different stakeholders that are involved in the project implementation and maintenance. Now over to you, Trifon, to tell us a little bit more of how we use the C4 model for documenting the solutions in our organization and the benefits of it.
Yeah. Mm. Yeah, thank you, Marty, for covering the basics of C4 model. But basically, here, guys, as I mentioned previous time, we were tasked with the following thing: how can we scale our practice and to keep the quality high? So basically, one of the things was that no matter the implementation, if we do a implementation of something that we have already done, basically the main idea was we to have some kind of a reference that the developers can stick to. So basically they can replicate the thought process, the approach, and so on and so on. So basically the first thing that we came up with is as an outstanding architectural item was to document the technical architecture. And this is how we selected the C4 model, how the whole thing started. But nowadays, in most of our projects, we document the technical design that we have selected during the solutioning part. And C4 is the way we actually document those technical decisions, solutions, etc. Over the time, around these technical architectures, basically we found actually a pattern that most of the solutions actually they have kind of repeatable components, right, or duplicated logic and so on and so on. And around this, we crafted the so-called technical reference architectures. Which we'll present shortly for a couple of examples. For today, Marty, if I'm not wrong, we plan to show a reference architecture for discovery and how we actually do integrations over C4, right?
Yes.
This is the content here.
Yeah,
And
absolutely right.
yeah, and we have a kind of a special thing that we'll demonstrate at the end of the session in a way how we want to use this whole modeling tool in the future. Yeah, and basically this is one of the main reasons that we selected C4 in order to have a repeatable technical solutioning practice. And Marty will mention from his experience what actually he get as a benefit from using that documentation approach.
Yeah, and on top of that, we have several benefits, like it is really easy to demonstrate to different personas, either architects, developers, business process consultants, anyone who is involved in the implementation, what exactly is happening in the software solution, what is the flow of the data when certain business project business logic is triggered, and so on. So these things makes it really easy to onboard people who have not experience with the ServiceNow technology, newbies that are implementing their first project, just showing them the basic components that they need to configure and the way that they need to configure them. On top of that, having these technical architectures for the different solutions that we implement with our customers, we are actually building up a library of reusable components that we can use for future projects similar to the ones that we have already implemented, with some minor tweaks in order to address the customer specific business case. And last but not least, we are techies, of course, and now with the era of the AI, we are planning to use this library as something that we can train the AI on to give us a little bit better basis for taking architectural decisions, drawing the pictures, and so on. This is something that Trifon mentioned. He will show this at the end of the episode, so make sure to stick around with us. With all that said, now I think, Trifon, it's time to show actually in practice how we document the solutions over the C4 model, right?
Yep. Let's do so. And by the way, guys, I forgot to mention this, but within the architectural team in DoITWise, the main practice that we are trying to achieve is the so-called DocOps practice, which means any single type of requirement that we get, right? We try to build a reference architecture around it. And this is also kind of the rule that we follow even when we do a delivery. So basically, every single thing we discover regarding the project, the customer, or whatever is it, somehow pop-ups as a documentation artifact at the end of the day. And for me specifically, and for the team, this was a enormous boost of the delivery experience, because nowadays, even without a real experience, I mean, you should have a ServiceNow experience, of course. For example, 5, 6, 7 years, it does not matter. But if you haven't implemented a particular plugin, let's say HR, SD, or something else, but you are comfy enough with the platform, if you check such reference architecture design document, basically you should be able to do kind of a initial implementation fairly quick. And now let's jump to the details, guys. So I hope that you can see my screen. So
maybe Trifon, before you start, we mentioned that the C4 model is actually tool independent, so this can be drawn in Microsoft Visio, basically in any charting tool. In our company, we are using the Lucidchart solution, so this is the solution that you will be seeing on the upcoming demos.
Yep, good one. So now what I'm gonna show actually is the solution design document template for discovery. And if you have a discovery project, basically this is a kind of a accelerator in order to define the scope and what actually you should discover. So I'm starting from the context diagram. As Marty mentioned, this is the most initial diagram that is crafted around the C4 model, and here we identify what are the external dependencies and the personas involved and the systems in scope. So in our case, we have a software system ServiceNow, which I think it's absolutely clear. This is we called it a centralized CMDB platform with ITSM capabilities. On top of it, we have the so-called technical account. It's from with annotation integration user. This is a user that is used to establish a connection between ServiceNow and the mid server. Mid server is an external component of ServiceNow with predefined read permissions. Second thing is we have a discovery administrator. So out of the workshops with the customer, basically, we need to tell them they need to actually have such kind of a discovery administrator in the beginning of the project's phase 1, 2, and 3. Normally, this is a person from our company. It's an IT consultant or a pattern developer or someone who actually knows the discovery product. And here, guys, we are currently discussing out-of-the-box capabilities, right? So if the product supports the thing that should be discovered, this is the way it should be done. Outside of this, it's a little bit different story. But they need to have the role of a discovery administrator, an employee who is responsible for discovery, configuration, and maintenance. As I said, in the initial phases of the project, this most likely is going to be an IT consultant from our side, for example, and over the time, we'll train a person who actually becomes a discovery administrator, and that guy can take over the job. Second important input is actually a CMDB manager or CI analyst, an employee who owns the CMDB and analyzes the infrastructure system. So one of the things that we notice normally in such kind of a discovery project is that the scope is not very clear, right? And in such scenario, that's why we define this as kind of a dependency, because we want to know what's exactly the discovery scope. If there is no such, we help the Mr. Customer to actually identify such CMDB manager or CA analyst, run some kind of a CMDB assessment, and depending on this assessment, we plan what to be included in the different phases of the discovery component. But this guy is tremendous for the success of discovery projects, because as you can see that and that guy analyzed the infrastructure system and defined CMDB change and adaptation work in ServiceNow. Another important component here is this relationship definition, which tells us that the ServiceNow system can pull data using the following 5 protocols: SIEM, SSH, WMI, SNMP, and HTTP. So in general, this is the supportability of the ServiceNow discovery product, which means anything that is SSH aware, WMI aware, SNMP compatible. For the serverless, we have the HTTP, or supports the SIEM protocol as some storage solution. So basically, all of those classes, all of those type of equipment, they should be easily discoverable, even if a discovery pattern is not present. And of course, our scope, normally, as a generic name, we called it an infrastructure system, which is a system which contains essential hardware, software, and services that support all IT functions and operations. The context diagram, I think, quite self-descriptive, and now the interesting thing is when we jump into details into the container diagram. So basically, here, the one type of system we expand is the ServiceNow system. So we want to understand the underlying components of ServiceNow system that run discovery. And then second system that we are exploring in a container diagram is the infrastructure system. So we want to understand what exactly we discover and what's the scope. From ServiceNow point of view, basically, again, the discovery administrator, that person here, actually what he or she does, it's to configure the so-called discovery schedules, right? Container configuration. So basically, someone should configure it. Customization, you might introduce some customization if needed, but not needed. So here, this is a template, which means you can simply define what's the state of this tag here, right? What those schedules do, right? They normally put a task into the EC2 standard messaging bus in ServiceNow, and the schedules, they put a discovery task in there. This mid server that we mentioned a moment ago, the mid server, this external component. So basically, as mentioned here, it's Java app. It actually checks for tasks, get those tasks, right? Execute those tasks using one of these 5 protocols against the target infrastructure system, return the task, and return the task back in this EC2, where actually a sensor, right, is triggered, and this sensor creates or updates some records on top of the database, in this case, the CMDB. In addition, here we have one supporting component, which is the discovery credentials, because normally those protocols, they need some kind of authentication authorization. So these discovery credentials, as you can see, this discovery administrator actually also configures credentials, right? In addition to the schedules. And those discovery credentials, they're used from, they are fetched by the mid server and used for authentication authorization against the targeted infrastructure setup. And you can see that this technical account actually is used for mid-server authorization and read-write capabilities against the EC2 table. On the right side, the next system that we said we'll explore is the infrastructure system. So basically here, you need to put the scope. what exactly you want to discover. In 90% of the cases, basically, this is here servers, and we can even split it like that. Win server, we say Win OS enabled computer, and here we can say Linux servers, and in addition to it, we have all Cisco OS enabled network equipment. So if you want to be a quickie one, basically you can simply list out all of the classes that you wanna discover. And by incorporating this practice, basically for a developer, it's quite clear. We stick to out of the box. We want to discover those classes, right? This type of infrastructure. That guy should configure discovery schedules. Now the guy can plan a better configuration approach, which means he or she can split the schedules per CI type or can group them by protocol. So different ways of grouping here. But the main idea is that this is the way how this whole thing works, and this is our scope on the right side. Of course, this is a super simplistic way of how a documentation should be built, and I'll show you a more advanced way a moment later. But before I jump to another example, I simply want to go to the next type of details where we actually explore some components from the container diagram. And now we go on a component diagram, which should tell us even in more details what's going on. And the interesting component here are the sensor, how actually a sensor is triggered, and a mid server, what actually is used from mid-server point of view in order this whole thing to work. If we now explore the sensor, right, you can see that this ECCQ, when a result of a task is returned here, there is in our scenario, there is a business rule, and this business rule is triggered. The business rule actually is searching for payloads from patterns. They are called horizontal discovery, and the so-called business rule triggers gets the corresponding payload and pipe it into the so-called horizontal discovery sensor. This horizontal discovery sensor actually leverages the identification reconciliation engine capabilities. And here you can see the flow. So this payload is piped to this sensor transforms it into a JSON, so it can fulfill the identification reconciliation expectation. And the identification reconciliation engine uses C identifiers in order to identify the corresponding payload properly, and also uses if any reconciliation definition. These are not mandatory for the usage of the IRE. But when this whole thing is executed in this order, basically a payload actually a decision if this payload should be populated is piped back to the horizontal discovery sensor, and the sensor uses glide record in order to populate a record into the database with the identification reconciliation decision. And if successful if successful identification has been achieved, basically the record pop-ups into the CMDB. And the second component that we want to explore is the mid server here. And the mid server, we have one component that is interesting to us, and this is discovery patterns. So those discovery patterns, no matter they're developed within the platform, but they're pulled locally on in the system directory of the mid server where it is installed. And basically this discovery pattern is when executed, it knows which protocol to select, gets the data, and return it as a task. So here's a note from my side is that it's not necessary you to, for example, if you want to expand mid-server, when we talk about reference architecture for discovery, it's not necessary you to expand the mid-server with any single component that actually builds a mid-server, but only the components that are of interest of our reference architecture document. And in this case, discovery pattern is the most important one, which tells us that, and even the developer, that there is a discovery pattern for this corresponding infrastructure that has been agreed during the pre-sales cycle, and so on and so on. And then the person knows that the target is to use discovery patterns to run it, because ServiceNow Discovery uses also prop and senders for some other classes, right? And also has additional components that are might be of the scope if needed, but in this case it's a standard discovery. And here, last but not least, this business rule. This is the most critical component because the whole logic starts from there. This is the portion which describes the code of a specific component here. And this is, for example, the code of the component business rule here. That's it. And this is more or less the out-of-the-box code that I copied. And now every single time, if I need to do a discovery project, basically I come here, copy this whole thing, define quickly a new scope depending on the customer requirements, and adjust here some of the components by adding a new labels here, what I want to achieve. And this thing normally gets around 30 minutes to have a very professional documentation for any discovery requirement. There is a small thing that I haven't mentioned yet, but I'll mention it with the next example. So you want to even scale further and make even more professional documentation. Now we can start binding different portions of the design document together. So here, as a next example, what I'll show you is, for example, how we incorporate these two together, the C4 and the CSDM data modeling part. So here I have a placeholder for, as you can see, use the CSDM, which means I have a placeholder to describe what's gonna be the data model behind those three components, for example, here that I identified. And now I'm give a real example with infrastructure system cloud. So basically this is a cloud discovery that I want to run here. All the other components are very similar with some adjustments here, but the main idea is to show you this is the topology that we want to discover. We want to discover a load balancer with a network, with the network component, then how the virtual server uses those networks and the load balancer and the storage behind the virtual servers and the installed software for the virtual server. So how this thing works is these are the data models, for example, that I have from our over the time we have developed data models for different components. So basically I have those here, right? And what I simply do is now this is the data model for virtual server. Now this is the data model for storage. This is for network gear, right? And this is for load balancer. Of course, if you don't have those data models, you need to develop them. But basically here, the main idea is that this is basically the full picture of this whole story. I have those models here, right? And I simply add them as part of the documentation. Then I simply say export as PDF. I want to crop to content, custom crop, sorry, like that. Up. and that's it. Then I can export it as a PDF, and this is basically everything that the customer needs to know at the end of the day when we implement a discovery solution. I guess that the example was quite descriptive, and you get the main idea. Basically, this was one of the first examples that I showed to Marty when I introduced the C4 model to him and to some other colleagues. Yeah, basically the main idea is that you can super easily leverage the knowledge of other guys by using such type of reference architectures. And if you're not a super experienced in discovery, with this documentation, what I just crafted for you, basically you can do the talk even on architectural level. And now back to Marty, because he will show you some other implementation of the C4 model for another component that is normally used in ServiceNow.
Thank you, Trivka. Actually, yeah, an awesome way of simplifying a 60-page Word document into a single chart, right? Into a single glass of paint. Yeah, as Trifon mentioned, this was one of the first things that I've seen when I joined the architectural team and when he was presenting me the way that the team works. And being a non-ITOM guy, actually my experience is in the ITSM and the platform areas of the ServiceNow ecosystem. I was able to actually grasp how the whole discovery works and what are the components to be configured. Was I able to configure it myself the first time? Absolutely not, but I was at least aware of the things that I need to ask to some other colleagues.
As we normally say, Marty, you at least know what to search for.
Yeah, at least you know what you don't know.
Yeah.
Okay, so going further, I want to show you another implementation of the C4 model, which was related to one of my recent tasks. Again, I will mention at the end what was the task and how the C4 model actually helped me to achieve the whole thing. But now let's first go through the example documentation that I want to show. Again, this is a summary of the software model. If you have forgotten, software system, container, component, code. How this looks like into the context of an integration with an external system. Again, as Trifon showed, we have the main component here, the ServiceNow system, and the technical account that will be used for the integration with the external system. The external system, in our case, is a BMC Remedy. It's a quite common case because we have customers that want to integrate with their third-party customers to, I don't know, to populate the ITSM, to synchronize the ITSM tickets and the flow of data between the two systems. And the main actor here is the foundation data. In our example, we will show how to synchronize the foundation data. And for this particular use case, we have the foundation data admin on the BMC Remedy part, which is responsible to manage the foundation data. Expanding the configuration that we have on the ServiceNow side, now going down to the container, we see that the main process is driven by the system scheduler, which is running the scheduled jobs to synchronize the data. It is calling the data source or the different data sources to synchronize users, groups, location, and so on. It is calling the data sources, which on their behalf are actually calling a REST message, which communicates with the external system over the HTTP protocol, basically sending and receiving some information in a JSON format, again, using the technical account for authentication. And when the data is returned back from the BMC Remedy, this actually data source passes the data to the database, to the staging tables, which are using the transform maps to transform the data and populate back the data into the actual target tables, not the staging tables now. If I need to expand a little bit more and I want to see what transformation that am I doing for examples, for users, for locations, or for incident categories, it can be even with the groups in here.
Here, Marty, sorry to interrupt you, but I had an idea when I was listening to you. So maybe a good thing will be under transfer maps container configuration, we can add a second tag that actually tells us what type of transfer map is that. Is it an RT or a standard legacy transfer map? It's also be good.
Absolutely good idea. We can do it live just to show what you actually mean. Let's say RTA and type. So we have the type, which is robust transform map, like that. And now this is giving even more information to the person who will be developing the transform map or the person who is looking at the documentation afterwards. Thank you, Trevka. This was a good addition, and also this comes to show that this is a living document that we're further expanding every time we have an interaction with the customer or between ourselves here internally in the team. Another component is the expansion of the system scheduler. Here we just said that we are using the system scheduler. Going down to the component, we are actually saying what is the name of the schedule job that is running and what is the running interval. Here we see that we are synchronizing users, and this is happening on a daily basis. Going to another component, this is the data source, which is called customers X users. It is calling an import set, which is populating data to the customers users table. Again, I already mentioned that this is calling the external system. This is not in the scope of the component. It's outside, but it is put here just for a reference. And we are actually giving more information about the basic authentication profile that we are using to authenticate in front of the third-party system. The rest is the same. We have the HTTP communication between the ServiceNow and the BMC Remedy system. Once the data is returned, again, as you mentioned in the example with the discovery, we're using the glide record functionality to populate actually the data into the database. And again, this runs the transformation. And what I tried to document, at least with the integrations, is the code that is custom built so that we have some information about it. Again, we have an example here. It's not a full complete code of the data source, but we know what is happening. And we further know that this data source is actually calling the customer X sync utils script include that actually handles the whole thing. And we further have reference to the script include itself.
Guys, again, following what just Marty said, I mean, behind that integration, most likely we have thousands lines of code, right? And here you can see that Marty documented only the component that normally triggers the whole logic, right? It's not necessary you to document absolutely everything, every single piece of code and the component, but to provide an idea to whom reads this document, how this integration actually has been run, and then the guy to have kind of an entry point for his or her investigation around the integration. That's the whole portion. The onboarding for this integration is minimized into up to 1 hour introductory session by reading the documentation. Otherwise, it will be, Marty, how long it took you for the first integration to understand end-to-end how it works?
It was more than a day, let's say. And this is given the fact that we had some kind of a written documentation in a Word format. So I had to read through the whole thing to see how the different components interact between each other, because you cannot specify this in a Word document, or at least you cannot do it in a readable format, the readable way that the
Yeah.
diagramming.
Absolutely. And I don't know about you guys, but this, I know what Marty is documenting, but this is the first time I see this integration. And I was listening carefully to what he mentions, but now I have the impression that I understand how this integration is written. And if I log into this instance, I will need 20 minutes to actually be able to replicate what I've seen here and to do the same investigation, understand what are the, in more details, what are the underlying components and so on and so on. So this is what we are talking about here. Quick onboarding.
Yes, and again, talking about onboarding, we know that customers are usually changing their requirements or changing their business processes throughout the time. If something needs to be added here or changed, this is a living document. We can just simply change it. And again, keeping our main version of the documentation here in the Lucid charts helps to the people who will be reading the documentation afterwards. If this was the use case with the Word documentation, we had to publish another version. And here we run into the problems that some people have the version 1 on their PCs, some other people have the most recent version, and then they just miscommunicate because they're not reading the same document. In this case, we have one single document that is living in the cloud, and this is the single point of reference for everyone. Now, I hope that the whole thing was understandable. If not, let us know in the comments. We are more than happy to jump on another session and expand further on any of the components that we showed. But now it's time to Trifon to take the share and show us how actually we leverage the capabilities of AI to help us with the solution designs with this C4 model.
Hope that you can see my screen, guys. But
yes,
I'll again refer quickly to the overall solution design document. But basically, while we're delivering projects to customers, we want to kind of get an output out of the project for us as well. And such type of output are kind of diagramming artifacts. And those diagramming artifacts, they're, according to what I explained to you, split into 4 components. We have some Archimate artifacts, which normally describe the delivery support of organization. We have technical architectures, as you have seen right now. We have the so-called data modeling artifacts, and we have some business process artifacts. And those artifacts, we at the moment store them in Git repositories. And one of the ideas that I had some time ago was how I can easily query all of those repositories and get immediate knowledge around it. So I crafted something that I called Solution Architect Assistant. The main idea of this thing is that this bot, actually assistant, can read data from those 4 repositories and craft an answer around our solution design document template. And normally, the way we use it, of course, guys, this, because of the hallucination, and this is not an easy matter here. This is not a product that you can use 100%, but I use it as accelerator to craft me a solution end-to-end. The main idea is that normally you pass requirements to this solution architect assistant and provides you with a design document for the corresponding requirements. The other way to use it is to ask for reference architectures, for deployment architectures, how to address specific implementation, or to assess a specific technical requirement. You can also upload another reference design. But the main idea here is, I'll show you a simple example. Provide me with reference architecture for discovery in ServiceNow. By the way, the assistant is not only for ServiceNow in particular, but in general, vendor agnostic. And it's live demo, hopefully to craft something for us. But the main idea is that this thing actually crafts a reference architecture for discovery, even with some requirement template. All of those requirement templates and sequence diagrams and C4 context, all of those are diagram as code following the Mermaid Markdown language, and they can be rendered immediately. But this thing follows our design approach, even with entity relationship diagram. So I'll give you an example here with the C4 context diagram. Mermaid live. Up. What happened? They copy this whole thing.
Can you Trifon zoom in a little bit?
Yeah. Up. Yeah. So yeah, basically this thing generated right now. As you can see, this thing follows more or less the design document that I showed you. It knows how to go to the repo, but for example, now it wasn't able to render the relationships, to build the relationships properly, but over the time it will work better. But as you can see, this is a system context diagram that follows the template that I showed you a moment ago: discovery administrator, CMDB manager, analyst, technical account, infrastructure system, and ServiceNow. So basically, this thing is reading from the existing documents and tries to craft the same representation as code. And the main idea is that over the time, we want to stick more and more to this solution architect assistant to craft some stuff for us. You can use it for a lot of things. For example, reference architecture for incident management, for example, and this thing should craft again the same type of diagrams. So what are standard requirements around incident management? So here are type of standard requirements. Then you have a sequence diagram with how normally the process looks like. Then you have a C4 context diagram, which explains again all of the technical architecture. You have a container diagram. All of those are coming from our real reference architecture documents. Of course, here the quality is not the same as the ones that are built by a real architect. We have some entity relationship diagrams. For some reason, this thing reads from ServiceNow, but it's not getting the real attributes. But the idea is to get approximate data model that should be used at the end of the day. Yeah, and that's it. How we want to use this assistant. By the way, I consider to actually share this assistant with everyone so we can leverage from different inquiries and actually improve the response of the assistant.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Exciting
Martin.
times ahead. Yeah. Maybe a little bit of my first impressions as I joined the team. As I told you, the first few times I saw this thing, it was kind of a difficult thing to grasp, or I was not able to imagine how I'm going to draw this kind of architectural diagrams and so on. But over the time, I got used to it, really used to it, and now I'm even preaching internally inside the team, not only in our team, but other Do IT-wise teams. And we are building some other stuff. About the task that I mentioned with the integrations, I had to document multiple integrations related to a transformation program that we are doing with a customer. And I had to run over, I don't know, 8, 10 integrations, do them over the C4 model. And what this gave me is actually easy way to identify the different patterns according to which the different integrations have been built over the time, to identify some naming conventions or missing naming conventions, some potential places where data breaches can occur. And this is actually the basis of the new solution design that we are going to present to the customer and hopefully get their approval. The idea is to identify the pattern of the way that integrations have been built or being built with the customer so that we have easier maintenance in the future. And the C4 model was really crucial thing for this thing.
Yep, absolutely, Marty. So I think for today, guys, that was the deep dive regarding the C4 model. We'll share the resources that we presented during the video with you, during the webinar with you. So what's ahead? Ahead, we need to do three additional deep dives for the rest part of the solution design document, where we'll show real examples how those are documented and used in the day-to-day practice. And from a poll that Marty actually placed in LinkedIn some time ago, you selected to present your financial use case. So basically, when we introduce all of the building blocks of a solution design document to you, the next thing we'll do is actually to do one financial customer, imaginary customer with real requirements, following the solution design document end-to-end for you. And thank you
Nice, a
guys
good
for
wrap
the
up
attention.
and good heads up of the upcoming episodes. Thank you, Trifon. Of course, as I mentioned the previous time, we are quite open to modify the way that we are doing the podcast to address any feedback. So feel free to let us know what you think in the comments. And of course, both of us are quite present in LinkedIn, so feel free to message us there and let us know what you think, the way that we do things, there's some potential points of improvement, basically anything, any feedback that you have to share. For now, we'll say goodbye and see you on the next one. Bye bye.
Bye bye, guys.